Guys, so I'm going to show you guys how to set up or write up an offer in Dotloop. To start, we are going to click on Add Loop. First thing that comes up is going to be the property address or the MLS number. So you don't just want to type things in willy-nilly. The first place I always start is with the MLS number, because if we can get an MLS number to auto-populate, then it'll bring up a whole bunch of information and it'll automatically load it into Dotloop, which makes things a lot easier. So I'm highlighting this MLS number and I'm copying it, and I'm coming over to Dotloop and I'm hitting paste. Now, when you paste something in, you want to make sure something comes up in the list down here. So this is the property that we're looking at. So I would end up clicking on this particular property. And this is asking me now if I want to import data. I do. So I would click on this import data button, and it will bring up this information. Sometimes you will have a pop-up window that says put in your MLS ID. And if you do get that window, whether you're a member of the Miami board or the Fort Lauderdale board, give me a shout and I'll give you a number that you can put in and it will auto-populate. Conversely, if it doesn't come up and you're putting in an address, you again still want to make sure that you are choosing something that is showing up in the list below. Even if it's not an MLS, if it says Google Maps, that's perfect. That's what we want. You want to click on that, because if you just type in the address and hit continue, these fields, these address fields will not populate into the Dotloop details section. So you always want to make sure that you're choosing something, whether it's an address or an MLS number that is coming up in the list. So again, I'm going to go back to this, hit import data, and it is showing the MLS number. That's great. So now we're going to hit continue. And the next section is it's going to want to ask us for a template. So you want to make sure that you're using templates and not just skipping over to continue, because the templates do a number of things. They will, they will import all the regular, the common forms that you're going to need, and it is also going to assign the roles correctly. So you want to make sure that you are using a template at every single loop that you use. So for this particular one, we're going to be purchasing this. And if you are buying, if you're using it as is, here's a buying loop for as is, and the PRA buying loop as is. These fields may change, but you'll be notified. So then there's the regular loop. There's listing loops as an example, leasing and rentals as well. So this particular one, we are going to want, select our loop, and we want the as is buying loop. There we go. Hit continue. We pass over the photo section and then it creates the loop. So now we want to move it. Now we want to open that loop. So we can just click on view loop here. And now it's brought us to our loop. Okay, first thing we want to do whenever we create a loop is we want to select the loop status. So here are the options when we're selecting a loop status. When we're first creating a loop, we're always going to go with pre-offer. And then when the offer gets accepted, we are going to need to change that to under contract. Be aware that when something goes under contract, you want to make sure that you are updating the status in Dotloop, or else the ERA moves program does not kick in. This is what this is what tells ERA moves to start. So make sure that you are changing your statuses appropriately as if the transaction goes through its different stages. If the property does not get accepted, or if the offer doesn't get accepted, you would just click on withdrawn, and you could send me a note and let me know, hey, this was a dead deal, or it's sold when it gets closed, etc. Okay, so this is where you change your statuses. So we'll click on pre-offer. Sometimes, let's say, for instance, you did use an address and you need to add a unit number. So for instance, this is 340 Sunset Drive is what's coming up. And if I remember correctly, this is it's condo, so it's unit 406. Why that unit number is not coming up here, I don't know, but we do need to add it. So to change that, all we got to do is click on the address. It brings us to the details section where our number of different things can be filled in here as well. As an example, you can, for instance, you can put in like down here, I believe, what do we got? Yeah, geographic area. You can put in a legal description if it was missing, etc. So there's a number of things you can do here, but to change the address here, we're going to click on this again, and I can put in Sunset Drive, and this was number $, number 406. Let me double click that. Yeah, it is 406. And then from here, you could just hit enter. Actually, just save it because I clicked out of it. So that's where you can actually save your the name of the file. And then there's a back to loop button here. And that brings us back to our list of documents. Now, these are the documents that are generally used with a purchase for a condo. That is not the first thing you're going to do. You are not going to jump into starting to fill out the contracts. If you do, you're going to be creating so much extra work for you, it's not even funny. If you scroll down to the bottom, this is where you want to start adding the people who are going to be involved. So this is really super important. First thing you want to do is you're going to see yourself here, and you have no role. Down here are where the roles are. So you're going to change yourself to whether you're the buying agent, listing agent, the tenant agents, the landlord agent, whatever. These are all the options for roles here. So there's a whole bunch of them. So there's definitely a role for you. So you choose your role. Since this was auto-populated, I can see that the listing agent has already been here. Now I'm going to double check to see what is coming up for the listing agent. So the listing agent's got his email address and the company name. Every contact at a very minimum has to have email and phone number. So be aware of that. So I need to add this agent's phone number. So I'm going to go back to Matrix, and I can scroll to the bottom to the agent information. And here's Eli's phone number here, and I'm just going to copy and paste. So I'm getting copy, coming back to Dotloop. Oops, sorry about that. Stick this back where it belongs. And coming over here to the cell phone number and hitting paste. Ideally, and I can't stress this enough, while you're doing this, while you're setting this up, you might as well put in the rest of the information while it's here. If you're dealing with rentals, for instance, you really need to have the agent's office name and address in here, because oftentimes for instance, escrow checks are sent back and forth between companies and such. So there's the street number 1520, and I just cut it out, and I'm pasting it into the next field here. That way I don't have to worry about it. Come back over here. That's Fort Lauderdale 33304. So add a city. And I can add Fort Lauderdale and 33304. And unfortunately, it just changed my company name because of my my browser set up with. There we go. Beautiful. East Sunrise Boulevard, all that fun stuff is in there. And unfortunately, again, there's a mistake that my browser is setting up things where with the autofill thing. So I'm fixing that stuff. There we go. Now I can hit save. Okay. So we've got my listing agent, the buying agent. Who else do I have to add? Obviously, I've got to add my buyers. So I'm going to put in my buyer's information. We're going to put in Joe Buyer here. He's my fake person. And I'm going to have to add a role, and he is a buyer. Again, names, cell phone numbers. So 954-896-7896. And then add person. I can add their addresses here as well. But again, at a very minimum, we have to have at least names, email, phone number. So now I'm going to put in Jan, who is Joe's wife, and that's Jan buyer, and she's also a buyer. Be aware that when you're adding more than one person, you don't add them in the same persons. They don't add them in the same people section. It's not Joe and Jan buyer. Joe's got a name, Jan's got a thing. They both have separate email addresses. They cannot have the same email address either. That is not trackable. It means their digital verification of their signatures will not be correct. The next person I'm going to need to add is also the seller. So to find the seller's information, I would come back to the MLS and I would click on the IMAP tab, and that will bring up the tax record. So here in the tax record, I've got Scotty Sulam. So I'm going to copy Scotty here, go back into Dotloop, add a person, put in Scotty, and add his role as the seller. Now, I don't have an email address. I don't have a phone number because I'm not Scotty's, I'm not his agent, but Scotty shows up on every single form as the seller. So I might as well put him in here so it auto populates whenever I add a form. It saves me that extra time, okay? When you're putting in people, you're gonna wanna make sure that you also put in, when you're creating your purchase contract, very minimum, you need buyer, seller, listing agent, buyer's agent. You're gonna need a title company. So I'm gonna add a title company as well. Let's go back. And I'm gonna add person, and I'm gonna put in my title company. So my title person that I use often is Molly Ernest with Ernest Teague Law. Now you notice that Molly, all of her information comes up automatically. What I've done there is that I have actually gone up to the people section, which is here under people, and you can add in your contacts by adding a person. You can put in somebody's name, their email address, choose what their role is, and then hit add person and save that, put it with all their other information, and that individual, whenever you add them, they'll automatically auto-populate. So I've done that with the title people that I work with. I've done that with the my mortgage brokers I work with. I've done that with my inspection companies. So I can't stress this enough. The more information you have in your loop, the easier things are going to be as you move forward. It'll all be in one place. So here's all my fun folks. I could also add my mortgage broker as well, who is Jim is going to be working on this one. And again, here's all Jim's information because I've added him as a person. So I've got all my players here. Again, I can't stress this enough. Add all of your people, all of their information. Make sure you have emails and phone numbers at a very minimum for every contact, and ideally have company information for your listing agent, for your mortgage broker, and for your title person. Okay. Now we can go ahead and start filling out the forms. So here's our list of documents that we've got. You need to have the active MLS in here. There's a very good reason for that. One is that this is not the greatest thing in the world, but oftentimes agents will change the commissions if an offer comes in. We've seen it before. So this is listed on the MLS as 3%. An offer comes in and they go in and they change it to 2.5%. This is your contract with the other agent. And if you don't have this saved where it says 3%, and when you get around to it, it just says 2.5%, and you're like, I swore it was 2.5%, 3% yesterday, it's too late. This is the only way to prove that you are getting 3%. So how do we get this out of Matrix and into Dotloop? It's pretty simple. So we come over here to print, and then there's an option of print to PDF. So I'm going to print this, click this to print to PDF. It's bringing up my PDF of that particular form of the MLS sheet. I'm going to download it, and I'm going to change the name to Active MLS. I already have one saved, so I'm going to overwrite it. There we go. And then I can go back to Dotloop. Now to get it in here, there's one of two ways you can do this. The easiest way of doing this is, since I just downloaded it, and I've got my little icon here that it's downloaded, I can just take this and drag this and drop it right onto there. And now I have the active MLS there. The other way of adding it is by clicking on this Add Document folder. Since we got to do the tax roll, I will show you how to, where on IMAP that you can download the tax record. So here you've got save as a PDF in IMAP. So it's generating my PDF. Come on, where you at? Actually did generate it, and it saved it right there. So I can go back to Matrix and, excuse me, Dotloop. And the other way of adding a document is by clicking on the Add Document icon right next to this particular folder. You'll notice that each one of these folders has an Add Document to it. So I can add documents to each folder using this little link here. And the other way of adding them is by clicking on Browse. And I can choose the tax record. So of course, the interesting thing is that the tax record here is doesn't give me a little pop-up. It just downloads it automatically. It's probably in my downloads folder, but I'm going to just stick it over there and drop it on the active tax roll, just make things a little easier. So I've got those two bad boys already taken care of. The next thing we're going to want to do is to fill out our forms. The first form we're going to start with, more than likely, is going to be the purchase contract. So we open up our purchase contract, and the first screen we see, if we scroll to the very top, is the autofill button. Now, since we've already added all of our people, all of our stuff is in here, which is pretty killer. Okay. If anything is missing, we can always, let's say there's buyer, brokerage, listing broker, etc. I have no idea why those are in here, but they are. We can actually select people if we choose to, or at the very, very bottom, there's an add person button, excuse me. And if we click on the add person, listing broker, I just added the Joe buyer as a listing broker. We don't want to do that. Listing broker, we're going to hit no one. If we add any information, it'll actually auto-pop, it'll actually fill in the detail section as well. So usually all we got to do is scroll down to the bottom, and at the very bottom, there's an autofill button. So anything that has been auto-filled will be in yellow. And just make sure those things are correct and you're good to go. So I've already got my legal description in here. I don't have to worry about filling in that stuff, my tax ID. If these items were not filled in, just so you know, you can always go back to the tax record. This is where your tax ID number is at the very, very top, and your legal description is here at the bottom. So you would just copy and paste those things into the into your form, into your Dotloop. Okay. Personal property. Most of the stuff for personal property is already listed here, so you don't have to relist it. But something to be aware of is that there are a couple things that are not in that list. Okay, so to edit that particular field, you've got this little edit button comes up, and then you would click here. So each new line is entry will place in the next available text box. So that's perfectly fine and dandy. But the couple of items that you want to be aware of is washer dryer is not in that list. So if there's a washer dryer in that unit, make sure you are putting in washer dryer. Another thing that is not listed, for instance, if you're selling a single family home with a pool, pool equipment. If let's say there's that little thing that scoots around the bottom of the pool and cleans up the bottom of the pool, that will, if they've spent $300 on that thing and you don't have it in here, it's gone. So you want to make sure you put in pool equipment if there's a pool. Okay, so be aware of that. So you're going to type in what's those couple of items and hit save. If anything is excluded from the purchase, you would put here. Usually that kind of stuff would be like, you know, the chandelier in the living room or something, and it'll usually be noted in the MLS sheet, usually somewhere, you know, in the remarks section. Okay, sometimes it'll be in the broker confidential section. And now we're going to move through and fill out our form. So The next thing we're going to do, okay, so this particular property is listed at what? 525. So let's say we're offering 500 grand. We're going to put in 500,000. I like putting in commas, makes things easier to read. And then we have the initial deposit. So people always ask, what should I be putting down for my deposit? Well, that depends a lot on how much the property is. Are you getting financing or not? What type of market it is, if it's a really hot market, etc. So usually good rule of thumb for first deposit is going to be, something like 10, 15 grand. So for this particular, and that also, let me rephrase that as well. It also depends if you're going to be putting a second deposit or not. Oftentimes, especially if on a lower price property, I'll put up one deposit and leave it at that, not even bother with the second. So this particular one, my client is going to be getting a loan. They're putting 20% down. I will put in 25,000 for a initial deposit. Okay. Next place we need to worry about, we need to check off one of these boxes. Is it accompany the offer, or is it going to be made in the future? 90% of the time we put in here, it's going to be made in the future within 3 days. That way you're not taking a check and then submitting it and then having to take it out if they don't make it, etc. Okay. The additional deposit to be delivered to the agent within blank number of days. Let me one comment about blanks. Fill them in. If you know what the date is, even if it's going to be 10 days, fill in 10, because that way the other agent is aware of the fact that it wasn't something that you just happen to have forgotten. Because when I receive an offer and none of the blanks are filled in, I'm like, did the agent intend to leave it blank? Did they forget about it? Do they not know how to fill out a form? It makes you look better if you fill the forms in. So when should the second deposit be made? Ideally, you want the second deposit to be made after your inspections. There's no reason to put in your second deposit in 5 days if you have a 10-day inspection period. So my client is going to be doing 7 days for their inspection. So I'm going to say the additional deposit will be put in on the 8th day. And what should that be? The second deposit, usually, a good rule of thumb is to have 10% of your purchase price in escrow. If your client's only putting 3.5% down, though, if they're doing FHA or something, then that might not be possible or reasonable. So then you might just be putting the 25%. But I'm probably, the other option too is this, is I always think of, if this deal goes south and the property's been off the market for 2 months, what do I feel is fair for the seller to have to basically get, so, out of keeping his property off the market? Well, again, the market right now is a little crazy, so I'm probably going to go with the full 10%. So I'm going to put in another $25,000. Make sure I got my comma. So we've got this up 10%, so it's the 50. Oh, excuse me, the 10%, so it's 50 grand. So the financing, that number can be expressed in a dollar amount or a percentage. Always use a percentage. Okay, my client's putting 20% down, right? They're not financing 20%, financing 80%. So I'm putting in 80% here as the financing. Other is rarely ever changed, or rarely ever used. And then balance to close. We recommend putting in balance. Okay. It's one that's, if this number changes at the top, then you got to change this number. And again, if you put in a dollar amount here, you'd have to change that one too. It just is one less thing you got to change, and not to mention, it avoids having any mistakes made with your math. Okay. The next section is time for acceptance. So this is when we're going to put in when this particular offer expires. Now, I hear this all the time. This is not when the seller is required to respond to you. Okay. Well, I told I sent in my offer and the seller needed to respond by XYZ day. Why aren't they responding? Well, it's because the seller doesn't need to respond to you at all if they don't want to. So this just makes sure that there isn't an offer floating around out there that is, if this was left blank and 2 weeks went by and the seller says, you know what, I want that offer, he could sign that offer and send it over to you. And guess what? Your client's under contract because it didn't have any expiration. So be aware that it has nothing to do with the seller's responsibility to respond to you. Okay. So with that being said, be reasonable with this. I mean, today's the 23rd. It's a Thursday. So I'm probably going to give till Monday to have a response by this. Okay. But be aware that if at any time between now and Monday, my client, the seller does not respond and my client has decided he wants to move on to something else he found over the weekend, all I got to do is send over an email that says my buyers rescinding their offer on your property effective immediately. And that's it. You're done. You're out. Okay. So give some time, enough time for the seller, not only to respond, but for you guys to go back and forth countering, because then it's another number that you don't have to change again. Okay. Moving along, we're moving on to the closing date. So closing dates. I've got some strong opinions about closing dates as well. One, this particular client is getting a loan. We see oftentimes, so, I wanted a 30-day close. I am not a huge fan of closing in 30 days if my client's getting a loan. There's too many things that come up and that become a problem. You're under the gun. It's just too fast for me, in my opinion. So I'm a big fan of, if there's a loan in place, doing the 6-week close. Okay. So that gives us enough time for 30 days for the loan to come in, and then another couple of weeks to get the paperwork together and anything else that needs to be taken care of prior to closing. Don't drive yourselves crazy trying to get a loan done and a closing in 30 days. Now, with that being said, if your client has completed all their work and their loan work, and what I mean by that is they filled out their application, they've provided their tax returns, they've provided their pay stubs, and they've provided their bank statements, then you know what? You can probably get away with having a 30-day close, especially if the lender says, yeah, go ahead. All we need to do is an appraisal. Then by all means do it. But be aware of these things, okay? So I'm writing this up on the 23rd. I'm guessing we will probably end up finalizing this somewhere like around Monday or Tuesday. So January, the end of January is going to give me roughly, what's it, 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 weeks. So I'm going to be moving my closing up into February. Everybody wants to close on a Friday. Don't do it. Closing on a Friday means that if something goes south on a Friday that needs to be taken care of, nothing can be done until Monday. And your client's going to be like, if your client's moving in, they're stuck with their crap in a U-Haul over the weekend, okay, or with the movers, whatever. So do your closings on a Wednesday, do your closings on a Tuesday. So I'm going to make this real simple. I'm moving to doing this closing on the 16th, which is going to be the middle of the week in the middle of the month. Okay. It gives me a lot of leeway to get stuff done. It gives me a lot of leeway during that closing week if I have to move some stuff around. Don't drive yourselves crazy doing Fridays and end of the month, no matter what day it falls on. That's not a great day either, because banks are all dealing with an end of the month closing, and that means that your loan, you're not going to get the keys for your client are not going to get released until loan funds. And if they sign their documents at like, a 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there's a good chance their loan doesn't fund until 6, 7 o'clock at night. So they're sitting around waiting for those keys to come in. So again, avoid Fridays, avoid the last day of the month. I am done with that. My little soapbox there on that one. Okay. So moving along, what do we got? If there's a renter in the property that's going to be there after closing, you want to make sure you check off that box. Assignability. So there's 3 options here. The option that is that you most likely should be choosing is going to be should be this one, the last one. May not assign this contract. Okay. Now oftentimes I generally will usually pick this one. the second one. The second one says may assign but not be released from liability under this contract. Why do I choose this one? I choose this one because I do sell a lot of properties that are on the beach that are vacation homes, and you know, that are, you know, for snowbirds and such. And they often will put, at the advice of their accountants, put it into an LLC or a trust or whatever. If this is checked, we don't have to go back to the seller and say, hey, do you give us permission to change the name? We can just do it. My client can just tell the title company, hey, change the name to, you know, Joe Buyers Trust, and we'll keep it at that. It doesn't really, the seller, we're not getting out of the contract, we're not going anywhere, we're still buyers, and so the seller shouldn't have any problem with that for the most part. Oops, sorry about that. So moving along, for the financing. Financing. Hold on one second. I'll be right back. Okay. Financing. So if the property's cash, property's cash. This particular one, we're getting a loan. As I mentioned before, fill in blanks. So we are going for a first blank is when the approval period is. So I've got like a 6.5 weeks close, 7-week close. So I can go for a full 30 days here. Be aware that if you're going for a 30-day close, and you leave this blank, that's a problem because your loan approval and your closing day is on the same day. And oftentimes people will be unaware of the 3 or 4 days that it takes to negotiate a contract, and they'll have a closing date that's 28 days with a financing period of 30 because they've left this blank. And if they don't get their loan, the seller doesn't get their money. And I've called legal hotline about this because I assumed, well, the closing date's a closing date. That's the do all end all of dates. And they're like, nope, it's not. They still have XYZ number of days to get their financing. So it's still open. So if you're doing a 30-day close, make sure you're not leaving this blank. Make sure you're putting in something like 21. You got to have time between loan approval and closing date to have your documents prepared. The documents have got to get to the title company. The title company's got to review them, prep them, put together the closing statement. So make sure that there is timeline, some lag time in between the approval period and the closing period. But since my closing period's for 6.5 weeks, I can put in 30 and leave it at that. Again, fill in these fields. Buyer's going to be my particular buyer's getting a conventional loan. And it's going to be fixed. Very few adjustable rates, but coming up that are available right now. Most banks don't do them because money is so cheap. Interest rates are very low. But in the coming years, as interest rates rise, more adjustable rates loans will be available to people. This is the blank that this is the field that we do leave blank. That is based on the interest rate of the prevailing rate for base buyer's credit worthiness. Again, this may change as interest rates start going up. And my client is going for a 30-year financing. Okay. Buyer shall make application for financing within blank 5 days. Ideally, you can put in 0 because your buyer has fully approved. They've already filled out their application and they've already provided all their documentation. So that is the best way to go. Moving along. Next thing is going to be just FYI, blanks when it comes to title, I generally leave blank. Those are the ones that I definitely do leave blank. I leave those up to the title. They're already done. Title people are used to them. I leave them alone. Coming here, we have to choose who is going to be picking and who's going to be paying for the title agent. So generally speaking, in Miami-Dade and Broward County, buyer chooses, buyer pays. We often use the Miami-Dade regional provisional contract with closing, section that saves your buyer a little bit of money. Things are split up a little bit differently. And then there's also seller chooses, seller pays. These often change. These are, by the way, these are only traditions. Okay, these can be any one of these can be used in any county. A lot of it depends on the market. You know, if it's a buyer's market and it's in Broward County, we used to do this all the time. Seller chooses, seller pays. Okay, we want the seller to pay for it because, hey, we're buying their house. So, but traditionally, buyer chooses, buyer pays in Broward, Miami-Dade, seller chooses in Palm Beach County. Then there's also the Miami-Dade regional provisional one, which splits up the cost a little bit more fairly. Home warranty, we do have home warranties we will talk about at another time, but we do have a home warranty available. We'll talk about how to use it. At this particular time, we are not asking anybody to get a home warranty. Special assessments. This special assessment is not like a condo assessment. This particular special assessment, there we go, I'll spit it out, is imposed by a public body. So as an example, let's say the city redoes the sewers on the street, and only those houses that are going to be benefiting by it, they're going to get assessed for the installation of that. This is what this special assessment is for. I always choose seller shall pay in full at closing. So that's what I always pick. Rarely have I ever seen this actually come into play. So don't sweat it. Let's see, moving along. The next section should be, yes, when we're doing our inspections. So as I mentioned previously, we're going to be having our inspections done in 7 days with our second deposit done on the 8th day. One thing that I want you to be aware of is that not only, you know, we have 7 days to do all of our inspections. Okay, the buyer can cancel for any reason whatsoever because this is an as-is contract, but it doesn't mean that you're doing your inspection on the 6th day and then telling the seller, well, I want a credit for XYZ on the 7th. This basically says this, I need to have everything taken care of. What all my inspections, all the credits, any type of repairs I'm requesting, everything done and signed on an addendum within 7 days. Okay. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean that you get up to 7 days to do your inspection and then you get to negotiate. This means it all needs to be done. So be aware of that. If you can't get your inspection and your negotiations done within the 7-day period, then you need to extend. Come to Tom, me, Paul, whoever, and we will help you with that. But if your inspection period is coming to a close, or any other period, the financing period, if it's coming up in the next day or two and it's not done, or you don't have everything taken care of, make sure you talk to one of us so we can help you with get that extended. Okay. On the purchase contract, sorry about that. Let's get back over here. Beyond the inspection period, there's nothing left to fill in until we get to the very end. So we can scroll through all this fun stuff and we come down to the additional terms section. So this particular contract, these are the addenda that we're going to be attaching. This is a condo, so we're going to attach the condo addendum. I'm going to come back over here and take a look at the year this is born. This is born in 78. This was built in 78. So the lead-based paint is technically pre-78. Well, honestly, just to be on the safe side, I'm checking it off. So because it is on that year, and so I'm clicking off the lead-based paint here, and that should be it. This might have another addendum that we need to choose. So make sure that if there's any other addendums that you need, that you check them off. Okay. The next section has the additional terms. You will notice that there's a couple of terms. There's a couple of things that are in here included already. If anything needs to be changed, you just click on that edit button and then you can add and choose whatever you want. Okay. So the first one has to do with the liens and such and permitting, and the second one has to do with our regulatory compliance fee, aka the transaction fee. And then beyond that, you want to make sure that these items are filled out as well. So cooperating sales associate, I'm surprised the broker's not filling in. So this is going to be ERA Infinity Properties. And Eli is with the Guides Company. So I'm going to copy that, come over here and paste that in there. And I'm done. So that's the purchase contract. I'm going to come over here and save it. And then I'm going to move out of the screen by using this little button here on the left. It's going to ask me, do I want to share this document? No, I do not want to share this document yet. I want to complete all of my addendums and send them all at one time to be signed by my client. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to show you the next couple of addendums that we're going to use for this particular deal. These are the most common ones. These other addendums are the ones that are added, that are automatically added. This was the home warranty I was talking about. We will discuss it again at another time. And this is the home warranty brochure. I don't need this brochure right now. So on each one of these lines with these different forms, there's 3 dots. Whenever you're in any computer, any computing program, if there's 3 dots next to something, it means there's something you can do with it. So here I'm going to want to archive it. So when you archive something, it gets rid of it, or at least you can't see it. So people you want to delete things. Technically in Dotloop, you really can't delete anything, but everything can be archived. You'll notice now that there is a show archived button here. So don't fret if you need to get it back. You just have to click on that and you'll see that particular item there. And if we click on this little thing, little 3 dots again, we can unarchive it if we need to. Okay, there's unarchive. So let's go to the lead-based paint. Click on that. We want to auto-populate. And now we can deal with the lead-based paint. So lead-based paint, basically they're pretty much, you're going to be dealing with the same thing with every single one of them. So just follow these instructions. I'm representing the buyer, so I'll be doing, I'll be working with these particular items. If I was representing the seller, you're always going to check out the same boxes for the seller as well. Seller has no knowledge, and the seller has no reports. Okay. In the buyer section, the buyer is either received a 10-day opportunity to do the inspection, or they're waiving it. Our buyers always waive. Now you'll notice I can't change this. I can't check this box off. And when I click on it, it's because it's assigned to the buyer. Well, the buyer is not going to know that he needs to do this. So I'm going to actually change who this is assigned to, and I'm going to try to assign it to anyone. Now I can click on it. Okay, so that's the one box you want to change here. So again, same thing with the sellers up there. Why would my client want to waive the opportunity to do the lead-based paint inspection? Is because if the place is that old and you want to do a lead-based paint inspection, one, the inspection is really expensive. And 2, if they do find lead-based paint, the only thing they're going to tell you to do is encapsulate it. And what is encapsulating? It means painting over it. So save yourself your clients some time and some money. You're going to waive it and you're not going to worry about it. While you're here in the lead-based paint, both the listing agent and the buying agent are required to sign, as well as the buyer and seller. So while you're here, you might as well sign it. So I'm going to click on sign now. There's somebody else's name here. So I'm actually going to change this to my particular name, Robert D. Kimball, and my initials are RDK, and I'm going to adopt and sign. Be aware that you could actually draw your signature. That's, if you're working on a tablet or something. And so now that form is done. So I'm going to hit save, move out of the form. I am not sharing. I'm moving on to the next form. My next form is going to be the Condo Association disclosure. So again, autofill. And we're going to fill out the condo disclosure. So again, the condo disclosure, we don't know, we're not privy to what the association's doing. So again, there are going to be some guesses on this particular disclosure. If there's something that's, blatantly wrong, the seller's agent will address it and they will counter you on it. So generally speaking, first one, condo association approval, 99% of the time, I should say 90% of the time, condo approval is required. So you click on that. Right of first refusal. There's a little difference of opinion in our office on this, but generally speaking, what I choose is this. First, what is right of first refusal? Which means that can somebody buy this out from underneath your buyer? And does the association have that right? Generally speaking, yes, the association does have the right. Again, we have a little disagreement in the office on if that's true or not. Usually that's reserved for developers to buy units back, specifically like a lot of times in condo hotels. Does the membership have an association? Does the members of the association? Does this mean the other residents? Do they have a right of first refusal? 90% of the time, they do not. Now, there's one building in the city that does allow this, and that is a co-op, and it's the Sea Tower on the beach. So they do have that, but generally speaking, by the time the unit gets to the MLS, this has already been taken care of. So right of first refusal, first one is yes, second one is no. The fees and assessments, where do we find this? We go back to the MLS. So this particular one, scroll down to the bottom. Condo fees $18.60 and it's paid quarterly. Okay, there's no land lease fee and there's no rec lease. So we go back up here. We come in here to this top one, $18.60.00. Actually, we're not going to do that because we don't know that it could be changed. And that is paid quarterly. If there was another assessment, let's say a land lease, that would go here. And if there was a rec lease, if you had to pay an association fee for, let's say, the recreation, where the clubhouse is and the pool is, etc., that's where this would be. Moving down, the special assessments, we don't know this. So again, this is where the seller's agent would actually fill this in for us and have us acknowledge it. But if there is a special assessment, this is super important. Make sure you're checking one of these boxes, because if you don't, that means the buyer is going to be on the hook after, if it's being paid in installments, it means the buyer is going to be paying for it afterwards. So we're clicking on seller, which means that they will pay for the assessment in full. Okay. Moving along down again, it's super important. Can't stress this enough. If your buyer, 99% of the time, they do not have the condo docs already. You want to make sure that they have the right to review the condo docs for 3 days and cancel the contract if they don't like anything in them. Next section down, my buyer is requesting them. Let's say your buyer's buying a second unit in the same building. At that point, you would actually end up checking off the buyer already acknowledges they've been provided a copy and they're not requesting one, and they've already received the documents. If they've bought the unit years ago, don't fret about the date, just put in today's date. Okay. Common elements, 99% of the time the parking spaces aren't listed in the MLS, so don't sweat this. Okay, that one's done. Hit save and move out, and no, we're not sharing this. This particular property is not a homeowners association, but I do want to go over this because this is again is a very common addendum that was used all the time. This does not work the same way as the condo addendum. Okay, this clearly says in big black letters, buyer should not execute this contract until the buyer has received and read this disclosure. Okay, it also states that they've got 3 days after receipt of the disclosure to review it and then cancel the contract. So if your buyer signs this now, that means that they've already received all this stuff. Okay, they've already received this, they're approving it, and they're moving forward. Okay, 99% of the time, if you're buying a home, when you're writing up the offer, you have not seen the the homeowners association documents. So do not fill this out and do not send this in with your purchase offer. Okay, you will get pushback from listing agents. Well, you're missing the homeowners association disclosure, and you just basically email them or text them back or tell them on the phone, please provide me with the homeowners association disclosure along with any documents so my buyer can review them. I don't know if there's any assessments on the property or not. Okay. So just be aware of that. You will not be providing this to your buyers to sign until after they have gotten the homeowners association documents. Okay. So it's the only thing I want to say about this. Again, just read this first paragraph and it will explain everything. Make sure you're getting the homeowner association disclosure from the listing agent with the docs. That's it. Perfect. Save changes. Yes. Share document. Nope. There we go. One other form that's in here is the condo receipt of condominium documents. This again is used after your client has received their documents. So when your client buys a condo, I'm going to check off condo. I'm going to put in the name of the condominium here. I can find the name of the condominium, generally speaking, either on the tax record or in the MLS, and it will show up Essex Tower. Here's legal description. That's the name of the place, Essex Tower Condo. What does this form do? This form tells everybody when the 3-day starting period starts. Okay. You'll either hand over the condo docs. Oftentimes they'll be online, and you'll just email them this form along with the link to the online to where the condo docs are, etc. But you need to get this signed when your client's buying a condominium and when they receive the condo docs. This has happened before. If you don't have this and the buyer decides 5 days before closing, oh, I don't want to buy this condo because pets aren't allowed. And the client knows the pets aren't allowed, and you've given them the condo docs, but you don't have this form, you have no way of proving that they've had their 3 days. And the buyer has every right to cancel the contract, get his money back, and walk away. So make sure that you are getting your receipt of condo docs form filled out at the appropriate time, which is when they get their condo docs. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's say there is another form that is not in here that you need. So like as an example, let's say we need to get the housing for old people. Let's say this is 55 and over community. I'm going to click on add document, come over here to templates. So templates is where all the blank forms are. We have them split up in different folders for you. Be aware the search bar doesn't work until you've picked the appropriate folder. So all the FARBAR addenda are actually in this all FARBAR addenda folder. And if something is not in here, it's something that's maybe very, very obscure or something else, the Florida Interactive Forms is where all the forms are. So just be aware of that. So I'm in this housing for older people. I can put in older, and here's housing for older people. Hit the little checkbox and then hit copy. And then that will copy it into my loop. And now I've got it here at the top. Okay. If I need to fill this out, just this particular one, again, we autofill and we check off the type of community is, and we're good to go. If you're adding addendums and you're unfamiliar with them, or you're not sure, if you're missing an addendum or if you need an addendum, you need to contact Tom, or you need to contact a manager, you need to contact a broker. If you are writing up your own addendum, I don't care how long you've been in the business, it needs to be reviewed by a manager or a broker, period. You're not writing up your own addendums and then sending them out. Too many problems occur that way. And I've been doing this for a zillion years, and I don't write up one addendum that is not pre-printed that that my broker doesn't look at. I always have a second person take a look at something. With that being said, all the contracts come with a blank addendum in them. this is one of the other huge problems with this particular addendum. Buyers, I mean, agents will fill these things out, you know, buyer and seller agree to like, buyer and seller agree to leave the dog, you know, for the house or whatever, you know what I mean? And there will be 3 or 4 addendums that are signed and executed that still have the title of blank addendum. Okay. And what ends up happening is when you actually have, you know, 3 of these things or 4 of these things in your list of forms, you don't know which one's which until you like open them up. So this is a big requirement. If you're going to write up a blank addendum, you are going to change the name of the addendum. So this is addendum number 2, for instance. Let's say it was the second one or the first one, the third one, whatever. And then you're going to put in what it was. Okay, so this is going to be, let's say we're changing the closing date, you know, and then it'll be closing date. Then I'll put in the date. Okay, imagine that 2.16.2. Okay, now when I come over here and I have my list of addendums, I know what this one is actually called. Okay, so make sure that you are renaming your blank addendums to add the addendum and basically a basic idea of what's in them. So if it has more than one item, I will have closing date, I'll have purchase price slash, and then some other things slash. This way, again, if you hover over it, you'll be able to see what it is. Okay, you got to do that. So now that I've got all my forms filled out, now I want to be able to send these out for signature. So you'll notice when we added that one addendum for the housing, it added it to the very top. I'm going to move this one down into the rest of these addendums here. So when I'm moving this, make sure it doesn't say replace with, make sure just it's kind of in a blank spot. Because when I check off the things I want the client to see and sign, I want the first thing for them to see is the contract. I don't want them to see this particular addendum. So I'm going to check off the forms that I want my client to sign. So I want him to sign these 4 particular forms. I'm going to come up here to share. And my 2 buyers should come up automatically. And this is where we can change what they can do. So Joe and Jan, we want them to sign so they can sign. Let's say Joe and Jan have their financial planner or their accountant or their son or daughter, whoever. They may have them in here as well. You can check them off, and let's say they can only view. So, oops, sorry, I don't want to do that. Let's say they can only view. So that person can only view, or they can fill and sign. You never want your clients filling and signing in purchase contracts or any of that stuff. That's used for specifically when you want somebody to fill something out. You want them to fill out, for instance, the seller's disclosure. So if you're sending out a seller's disclosure, that will be fill and sign. But 99% of the time, or let's say it's an application for a tenant. Okay, we have an application in there as well. That's when you would use fill and sign. If it's to another agent, you'll see it automatically defaults to can edit in private. This allows the other agent to manipulate the program in a Dotloop, in like a free Dotloop format. But 90% of the time, they're not going to do that unless they use Dotloop. So we're going to click off these 2 particular fields, and then we're going to hit share, and off it goes. So we can close this out, and we can see now when we hover over this, we're still waiting on Jan and Joe to sign. Okay. So be aware that you can let your clients know that, hey, I've emailed you the forms to sign. You can sign them on your laptop. You can sign them on your tablet. You can sign them on your phone. Okay. So when your client says, well, I'm at the grocery store, I can't sign that addendum until after I get home, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I need that addendum signed now. Please do so on your phone. Be aware that they can do that on their phone. I suggest if you're having it, you might want to create a loop and send yourself some forms to sign, so you can see what they are, what they're dealing with. Another cool thing that Dotloop can do is if your client has looked at something and they haven't, you can see the status of what's going on over here. So currently right now, well, I'm going to put you on hold for 1 second here. So again, when you hover over these particular things, things change. So as an example, you can see now that Joe is viewed, but still waiting on Joe and Jan to sign. So if he's viewed it, I can actually say, hey, I can even text Joe and say, Joe, I know you've seen the contract. What's the holdup? Does something need to be changed? Blah, 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 blah. So be aware that you can see this fun stuff. You will get an email when the client has signed this. And then you can move forward from there. So if you have any questions on creating or setting up a contract, please don't hesitate to give us a shout. Again, let us know and we will help you out. Okay.